The clock struck 3:14 a.m. over the desert skies of Qatar. For a brief moment, everything seemed calm around Al-Udeid airbase. Then the silence shattered. A single Iranian Sumar cruise missile tore through the darkness at high speed. Seconds later, it smashed into the center of the installation with devastating force. Reinforced concrete disappeared in a violent flash as the impact ripped apart a section of the runway. But that first strike was only the beginning. Dozens of additional missiles followed behind it in a coordinated wave. One after another, they slammed into critical sections of the airfield, transforming smooth pavement into a landscape of burning debris, shattered concrete, and smoking craters. Inside hardened aircraft shelters, America's most advanced fighters sat untouched. The F-35 Lightning II remained fully operational, yet it could not move. Its engines were intact, its electronics were intact, its stealth systems were intact. The runway was not. Without a safe surface for takeoff, the aircraft were effectively imprisoned on the ground. Iranian planners understood something many people ignored. Destroying an aircraft was difficult. Destroying the runway beneath it was far easier. Within minutes, the strategy worked. The airbase fell silent. No fighters launched. No bombers climbed into the sky. The airspace remained empty. Confident that American air power had been neutralized, Iranian naval forces began moving toward the Strait of Hormuz. Commanders believed they now controlled the battle space. What they did not know was that 50 miles away, another aircraft was preparing to enter the fight. Unlike the advanced fighters trapped on the base, this aircraft did not need a perfect runway. It barely needed a runway at all. Far north of the damaged airfield, an isolated stretch of public highway cut through the darkness. The road was old, cracked, and poorly maintained. There were no landing lights, no control tower, no support infrastructure. Just asphalt. Suddenly, the quiet road began to vibrate. Two engines roared to life. Heat waves rolled across the pavement as a heavily armed aircraft accelerated through the darkness. High above, an Iranian reconnaissance drone detected the thermal signature immediately. Its sensors zoomed in. The operators expected to see one of America's modern stealth fighters. Instead, they stared at a machine that looked like it belonged in another era, an A-10 Thunderbolt II, the famous Warthog. To many Iranian observers, the sight was almost laughable. The aircraft was over 50 years old. American officials had discussed retiring it for decades. Compared to stealth fighters, it seemed slow, outdated, and vulnerable. The local Iranian commander barely reacted. He ordered a nearby Syed 3 air defense battery to prepare an engagement, and then returned his attention to the larger operation. As far as he was concerned, the problem would solve itself. Meanwhile, the A-10 continued accelerating. Its engines reached maximum thrust. Unlike most modern jets, the Warthog's engines were mounted high above the fuselage. The design looked unusual, but it served an important purpose. The elevated position prevented debris from being sucked into the engines during operations on rough or damaged surfaces. Where a stealth fighter might suffer catastrophic engine failure on an unfinished road, the A-10 thrived. The battered highway became its runway. Less than 3,000 feet later, the aircraft lifted smoothly into the night sky. What Iranian intelligence did not realize was that this was not the same A-10 they remembered. A classified modernization program, completed in 2026, had transformed the aircraft internally. Beneath the familiar exterior sat an entirely new digital architecture. Miles of aging wiring had been removed and replaced with advanced fiber optic systems. Modern mission computers processed information faster than any previous version of the aircraft. Fresh composite wings increased durability and payload capacity. Mounted beneath those wings was enough firepower to reshape an entire battlefield. Rows of GBU-39 small-diameter bombs hung from upgraded pylons. AGM-65 Maverick missiles waited beside them. The aircraft climbed only briefly before descending once again. The A-10 preferred operating close to the terrain, flying low-reduced enemy detection opportunities while maximizing survivability. Along Iran's coastline, radar operators attempted to track the approaching aircraft. The task proved difficult. The Warthog blended into ground clutter generated by hills, buildings, and uneven desert terrain. The radar picture became messy, confusing, incomplete. Yet one sensor platform maintained visual contact. The reconnaissance drone continued observing the aircraft from high altitude. Its operators noticed something unexpected. The A-10 was not moving away from danger. It was flying directly toward it, straight toward the naval blockade forming inside the Strait of Hormuz. As the aircraft crossed the coastline, Iranian radar screens finally displayed a solid target. The return was impossible to miss. Unlike stealth aircraft designed to disappear, the A-10 appeared clearly. Large. Obvious. almost defiant. Skimming low above the Persian Gulf at nearly 400 miles per hour, it cast a moving shadow across the waves. Iranian commanders interpreted the situation exactly as the pilot hoped they would. They saw an outdated attack aircraft approaching heavily defended territory. Nothing more. Their engagement radars switched to maximum power. Tracking systems locked on. Missile crews prepared to fire. But the activation of those radars revealed something critical. Inside the A-10, the new active electronically scanned array radar instantly began collecting information. Every emission became a clue. Every signal revealed a location. Within moments, onboard systems generated a detailed digital map of Iran's coastal defense network, radar sites, command centers, missile launch positions, communication nodes, everything. Then the Sayad-3 battery launched. A surface-to-air missile surged skyward before turning toward the approaching aircraft. Its guidance system locked onto the target and accelerated. For older aircraft, this moment often marked the beginning of the end. Not today. The upgraded A-10 carried a sophisticated electronic warfare suite capable of creating false targeting information. The system projected a convincing electronic duplicate of the aircraft hundreds of yards away from its true position. To the missile seeker, two identical targets suddenly appeared. The guidance computer hesitated, then it chose the wrong one. Seconds later, the missile plunged harmlessly into the sea. The Warthog never altered course, never changed altitude, never showed hesitation. It simply continued forward. And then came the moment Iranian commanders never expected. The aircraft did not descend toward the missile battery. It did not charge directly into the defensive zone. Instead, while still 40 miles away, the A-10 released its first wave of precision weapons. Bomb racks separated cleanly from the wings. GAU-39 small-diameter bombs glided silently into the darkness. The upgraded pylons allowed the aircraft to carry far more weapons than previous versions. Instead of a handful of bombs, an entire swarm now moved toward the target area. Iranian operators had only seconds to react. Too late. The first group of bombs struck the primary coastal radar installation. Metal structures collapsed instantly. Additional weapons smashed into command vehicles and communication systems. Electronic equipment vanished in fireballs. Moments later, the remaining bombs found the missile launchers themselves. Secondary explosions erupted across the mountainside. Missiles detonated while still mounted on their launch rails. Fragments of metal blasted across the landscape. Within a single minute, an air defense network considered nearly untouchable had been crippled. The coastal shield was blind. The missile crews were gone. And the A-10 Thunderbolt II continued south toward the naval blockade, carrying enough remaining firepower to begin the next phase of the battle. The shattered remains of Iran's coastal defense network were still burning when the A-10 Thunderbolt II turned south. Behind it, radar stations lay in ruins. Missile launchers had been reduced to twisted metal. Communication links were silent. An air defense system that had taken years to build had been crippled in less than a minute. But the mission was far from over. Ahead lay the Strait of Hormuz. The narrow waterway had become crowded with Iranian fast attack craft moving into blockade positions. Dozens of vessels zigzagged across the dark water, creating a web of overlapping attack routes. Their commanders believed American air power had already been neutralized. The runways were destroyed. The fighters were grounded. The skies belonged to them. Then radar operators spotted a single aircraft approaching from the north. At first, they assumed it was a mistake. The radar return was too large, too obvious. No modern combat aircraft would make itself so visible, but the contact remained steady. The aircraft continued descending, and soon visual observers confirmed the impossible. It was an A-10 Warthog, the same aircraft many military analysts had spent decades calling obsolete. The same aircraft the Pentagon had repeatedly tried to retire. Yet somehow it was the only American attack aircraft still operating in the region. The Warthog dropped lower, 400 miles per hour, 500 feet above the waves. The aircraft skimmed across the surface of the Persian Gulf like a predator searching for prey. Below, Iranian boat crews reacted immediately. Heavy machine guns opened fire. Streams of tracers climbed toward the sky. Thousands of rounds filled the air between the boats and the incoming aircraft. From a distance, the barrage looked overwhelming. But the A-10 had been designed for exactly this environment. Its cockpit sat inside a massive titanium armor shell capable of protecting the pilot from direct hits that would destroy many other aircraft. Bullets struck the fuselage. Sparks flashed across the metal skin. Yet the aircraft kept flying. The impacts barely slowed it. Inside the cockpit, targeting systems identified the lead vessels of the swarm. The pilot selected a Maverick missile. A second later, the weapon launched. The missile accelerated across the water, its seeker locking onto the hottest section of the target, the engine. The Iranian boat crew had only seconds to react. Then the missile struck. The violent explosion tore through the vessel. The engine compartment disappeared in a ball of fire. The hull shattered. Fragments scattered across the water. The lead attack craft simply ceased to exist. Shock spread through nearby crews. The aircraft was proving far more dangerous than expected. But the Iranians were not finished. Hidden behind a large commercial tanker, a nearby frigate had been waiting for an opportunity. Its crew finally got one. A heat-seeking missile launched from concealment. The weapon accelerated directly toward the Warthog. Warning systems activated inside the cockpit. The pilot reacted instantly. But the missile had been fired from extremely close range. There was not enough time. The weapon slammed into the aircraft's right engine. Fire erupted behind the wing. Metal fragments exploded outward. Pieces of shattered turbine blades ripped through the engine housing. The aircraft lurched violently. Its nose dipped toward the water. Iranian crews watched with excitement. Surely no aircraft could survive a direct engine hit at this altitude. They expected to see the Warthog plunge into the sea. Instead, it kept flying. The reason lay in the aircraft's unique design. Unlike most jets, the A-10's engines were mounted far apart from each other. The fire consuming the right engine could not spread to the fuel system or the left engine. Automatic suppression systems activated immediately. Within moments, extinguishing agents flooded the damaged compartment. The flames disappeared. Smoke remained. The engine was destroyed, but the aircraft was still airborne. One engine continued producing thrust. One engine was enough. The damaged Warthog leveled out. Hydraulic fluid leaked from damaged lines. Sections of the tail were riddled with holes. Its right engine hung dead and silent. Yet the aircraft continued advancing toward the blockade. This was the nightmare scenario Iranian commanders had failed to consider. The A-10 was not built like a fighter. It was built like a tank, and tanks do not quit after one hit. The pilot lined up at the center of the boat formation, then activated the weapon that made the aircraft legendary, the GAU-8 Avenger. A 7-barrel cannon so massive that engineers had effectively designed the airplane around it. The weapon began spinning. A fraction of a second later, it unleashed destruction. The sound echoed across the water. A deep mechanical roar unlike anything else on the battlefield. 30mm shells poured from the cannon at an astonishing rate. The first burst crossed through a cluster of fast attack boats. Explosions erupted instantly. One boat split apart. Another vanished beneath a column of fire. Fragments ripped into nearby vessels. Water erupted in giant plumes. The Warthog continued firing. Its stream of shells walked across the formation. Boat after boat disappeared beneath the barrage. Crews abandoned attack positions and turned toward shore. Panic spread through the swarm. Within seconds, what had been a coordinated naval blockade transformed into a chaotic retreat. The surviving vessels fled at maximum speed. The blockade had been broken. The battle was not over after the damaged A-10 survived the initial attack. Smoke streamed behind the aircraft as it headed toward a highway operating base for an emergency landing. Iranian forces had already identified the location and prepared an ambush. As the Warthog descended, ballistic missiles struck the highway, creating huge craters and scattering burning debris across the landing zone. Despite the chaos, the pilot had no choice but to land. The A-10 touched down hard, bounced violently, and rolled through smoke and wreckage. Thanks to its rugged design and reinforced landing gear, it survived once again and came to a stop beside the highway. Moments later, a new threat appeared. A swarm of Iranian suicide drones approached, aiming to destroy the grounded aircraft. With only one engine still working, escape seemed impossible. However, the A-10's modernized systems detected the drones and shared targeting data through a military network. A U.S. Navy destroyer received the information and launched interceptor missiles. Most of the drones were destroyed before they could reach the aircraft, while the few survivors failed to cause serious damage. Ground crews immediately rushed to repair the battered Warthog. Fuel was supplied from a disguised support truck. Emergency repairs were made, and fresh precision-guided rockets were loaded. Although the destroyed engine could not be replaced, technicians removed damaged components to reduce weight. With more enemy missiles on the way, time was critical. The pilot restarted the remaining engine and accelerated down the highway. Despite heavy damage, the A-10 became airborne again. Soon after takeoff, its sensors detected the missile battery responsible for attacking the landing strip. The pilot launched precision rockets at the launch vehicles and nearby bridge supports. The strikes collapsed the bridge, burying the missile unit beneath tons of debris. With the mission complete, the damaged A-10 continued flying low over the terrain toward another highway strip. The battle demonstrated why the aircraft remained feared despite its age. While critics called it outdated, the Warthog proved that durability, adaptability, and the ability to keep fighting under extreme conditions could still make it one of the most dangerous aircraft on the battlefield.